What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to episode number 370, let me double check, 8 of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. This is the hot tags of the week, where we're going to be breaking down some of the current events, the rumors, the news, the gossip, and some other kind of things we want to talk about. Joining me on the line right now, I've got Robert D. Felice.
Yes, I am Robert D. Felice, your faithful Smark Out Moment co-host. But right now, it's boss time! And I've got the boss, Tony Mango!
Now I'm going to get some little bling on my fingers and fuck Makazi, apparently.
Yeah, this is almost became the podcast where I fuck Makazi.
Yeah.
And by the way, Callum, if you made it this far in the podcast after I said it's boss time, thank you. I appreciate you.
Check out 2001 The Wrestling Odyssey episode 2. There you go. There's your plug. February edition is up, everybody. If you want to check that out, that was the most recent thing that we have done. And that's why we're going to hot tags now. That's how planning works and scheduling works, even though I actually honestly forgot that we were doing this earlier today. But you probably didn't need to know that little behind the scenes thing. But what the fuck, why not? Who cares? I love you guys. You need to know that information. So, hot tags. They're hot, they're steamy, and they're tags. So let's get into them. Now that my thing is up and I don't need to stall anymore, I've got a couple things to talk about. And let's just breeze by this one really fast, because I don't think this one's going to get a lot of conversation. So, Goldust has changed his Twitter and his Instagram handle. He is no longer Goldust or WWE Goldust, wherever he was in those. He is just Dustin Rhodes. And then on Instagram, I believe he's Dustin Rhodes TX, which is kind of weird that he couldn't just get Dustin Rhodes, but whatever. I don't know how that stuff necessarily works. I've never changed any of that. So that's at least one more sign towards the idea that Goldust may be going to AEW and distancing himself a little bit from WWE.
Yeah, I think for me this was huge news because Cody is still teasing his opponent for Double or Nothing, and they're blurring out the guy's face. They won't say his name, but a lot of people feel like it's Dustin because the first thing that Daniel said was, well, this sounds personal, and I don't know. I want it to be Goldust, but at the same time, if you listen to 2001 A Wrestling Odyssey, currently available on iTunes and our YouTube channel, you would hear me say I'm not the biggest fan of Dustin as a wrestler when he just wants to be Dustin.
Justin Dustin?
When he's Justin Dustin, I'm not a big fan of him. When he's Goldust, he blocked me on Twitter once upon a time for this, because I legitimately said I liked Black Rain.
He blocked you because you said that you liked his character?
He did not want anyone to bring up Black Rain, and I legitimately enjoyed the character of Black Rain.
Wasn't it just Goldust, but
yeah, I think
Black?
it was a bad period of time for him, so he just doesn't want to talk about it or remember it. But yeah, I think good for Dustin if he's going to go to AEW and be a producer. If he's going to be a talent, great. I think he can be a great commissioner figure. But as a wrestler, I don't know. But that being said, his 2014 run, yes, that was 5 years ago, but still, his 2014 run was one of the best, comeback runs I've ever seen in my life.
He is an odd character when it comes to that kind of stuff, because I would argue his 2014 scenario, and for instance, that match between the two of them against the Shield, that might be my favorite Goldust match ever. And 1995, 1996, 97, when he was supposed to be in his prime, so to speak, and all that, he wasn't even in as good of shape as he was later on in his career. And then he had his times where Black Rain, of course, was probably his absolute lowest point. And there's been ups and downs as far as character work and all the other kind of things like that. But for a guy that's played The Natural and Seven and all these other kind of crazy things like that, part of me actually kind of likes the idea that he would just go back to Dustin Rhodes. And I'm kind of curious how that would work out. If we get Dustin Rhodes versus Well, they need to figure this shit out and
They
call
need
him
to
Cody
give
Rhodes.
Cody his fucking name back is what they need to
Yeah.
do.
I'm sick of the whole just being Cody thing. I know that a lot of people are like, well, he gets billed as Cody and Brandy Rhodes, but that's
Yeah, which is ingenious. Good on you boys for figuring that one out. Cody and Brandy Rhodes. I love that.
that is one of the better ones. One of the other ones that I like a lot is when people change an S to a Z. Just to kind of be like, yeah, it's the same name, but the thing that one of the worst ones, this random ass aside topic about that, I hated so much when Chris Masters and Luke Gallows were out of WWE at the time. And they weren't that far removed from it, but I remember them having some kind of a show somewhere and seeing the poster, and all they referred to them as to get around it was Chris Master and Luke Gallo. And I'm like, you took the S off, and it sounds awkward as fuck. Don't do that anymore. If you need to go by a different name, like Doc Gallows, do that. That's better, you know? But Luke Gallo, it was like, and Chris Master. Ugh. Dustin Rhodes, though, I mean, I would assume he probably owns that name at this point if he's switching it over to that. And I'm cool with Dustin Rhodes versus Cody Rhodes if they go in that kind of route. So I want him to go to AEW. I want him to find a way to be as successful as possible, because even though he probably would be a lifer in WWE if he kind of asked, I guess, I just kind of feel like there's not really much that he would be useful for. There's so many producers and there's so many people that are above you, and what really could Goldust contribute in WWE, you know?
Yeah, and I think AEW is still so exciting. And now, bear in mind, we may be talking in 6 months and it's not. But right now, they could use a Dustin Rhodes. They could use a Billy Gunn. And here's what I hope that they get. X-Pac. I hope in some way, shape, or form, even if it's a short run as a wrestler, I want them to get X-Pac.
That'd be cool. I like X-Pac.
But I'm glad that Dustin owns Dustin Rhodes. I didn't know that he did.
I'm assuming that he does, because, I mean, if he switched his Twitter handle over to that, it's probably at least just a good sign that he owns it, you know?
You don't think they could get away with the name Runnels? They had Terry use that for a while.
I mean, you know what? Like, the AEW crowd, they know this shit. So
I'm on the trademark database. Yes, he does own.
He does own Dustin Rhodes?
He does. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. Curious again why he couldn't just get the Instagram handle. Why he needed the TX in that. Maybe he wanted it. I don't know. Maybe Dustin Rhodes XOXO was completely taken already, and you know, old screen names. Do you remember like your shittiest old screen name? Totally random aside topic. This is like,
okay. Well, like
mailbag type thing, but why not?
I had way too many. I remember, like, specifically for AOL, I had Pepsi Addict 145. I was a huge Edge fan, so I had On the Edge 1906, thinking that was the date that he won the belt. I was off by a day. It was actually the 8th. But my typical one was the Show Stealer 69.
69, of course.
Of course it's 69, because I was a teenager, and that's funny.
I got a funny thing with AOL. I tried to, for anybody who's ever seen the movie Reservoir Dogs, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, there's a line in the movie where Joe, the guy who's controlling all the people who are all the criminals, he says, "All right, everybody, quit piss farting around." And my favorite character in the movie at the time that I was trying to make this screen name was Mr. Brown, which was Quentin Tarantino's character. So I tried to make a screen name that was Mr. Brown Piss Fart, and AOL rejected it, saying and I remember this specifically because I remember laughing hysterically at it. Their response was, it was rejected because it was, quote, too violent of a name. I'm like, Mr. Brown Piss Fart, even if they thought I was saying brown piss, How is that violent?
Well, no, it's violent.
Vulgar, but
You
not
can't have
violent.
violent brown piss farts.
A buddy of mine, though, he goes, "Oh, let me try Mr. Orange piss fart." They let him use it. So, brown piss. Who would have thought that's too violent? So, if Goldust wants Mr. Brown piss fart, he can't get that on AOL, but Dustin Rhodes TX on Instagram. At the very least, the story behind it is another sign that he might be leaving WWE in the near future at some point. But more on that if it pops up, because we do have some other people to talk about when it comes to that, because 2 releases that we had talked about before are official, and then 2 that kind of came out of nowhere happened. Hideo Itami had said that he was leaving, and he switched his Twitter handle over, and he did all the kind of things like that. They even filmed like him saying goodbye to people. So, moot point at this point to just be like, yeah, Hideo Itami's been released from WWE. Ty Dillinger also did something similar. He had said on social media that he had requested his release, and, a couple days later, it's official. But then we get 2 other ones. Arn Anderson and TJP. And the more that's coming out about this, the stranger and stranger that it becomes. Before we get into the TJP and Anderson one, any lingering thoughts on Tommy and Dillinger? We mostly have talked about it all in the past.
I think it's interesting that they gave Dillinger the release that 90 days out puts him right at, I think, the Thursday or Friday before Double or Nothing.
Ah, really?
And Cody is a big fan of Ty. He was very outspoken about Ty being fearless and the way that he quit, which, let's be honest, guys, it's very much a fearless move to go, I'm not going to take this guaranteed money. I'm going to bet on myself and try my hand out there.
Especially when you've already been let go from that company in the past.
Yeah. Poor Stan.
He worked his way up from the whole Gavin Spears type thing, got his job back, and then said, if you're not using me, then see ya.
Here's my question to you, and this can tie a little bit into TJP, but specifically these 2 because they were NXT guys. You think it pisses Triple H off?
Oh, it has to. Because that Triple H is doing a better job in NXT, and that based off of the way that he reacts to certain people, that he cares about pushing them, and that he becomes, more familiarized with them, and then it's like kind of passing the buck up to Vince McMahon, and then Vince doesn't do anything with them, and it's almost sort of like, I don't know, you gave him a bad Christmas gift, and he put it off to the side and never used it, or something.
You think that's the way Vince McMahon saw Ty Dillinger, as just like a bad Christmas sweater?
Yeah, kind of. Sort of like, well, that's great that he was great in developmental. He'll be a great live event guy. And so, tell me about this Lars Sullivan guy. Like that kind of thing.
Well, even with Lars, see, I have a theory that the reason why Elias and Alexa and Carmella succeeded is because that they had nothing on NXT.
Mm-hmm.
They had nothing there. They were seen as like bit players at best, and that's why you've seen Elias succeed really well. You've seen Alexa Bliss blow people out of the water. You've seen, Carmella go from being a sidekick to a main player for a while, because I think there is that obsession of like, I'm going to take these guys and make them something special, which is why I thought that they were going to push EC3 to the moon, because NXT didn't get a chance to, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
Total opposite. He lost to Apollo Crews on main event. It's like, fuck. But it is a chance that happens with Lacey Evans, and there's obviously exceptions to that rule, like Asuka and the 4 Horsewomen, and but it does kind of seem a little bit suspicious that if you're really successful in NXT, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be even treated like a proper mid-carder on the main roster. And Ty Dillinger was one of those guys. Like, he came in and he was never going to be like the guy. And I think that even Ty Dillinger would kind of admit that. Like, He's not going to be the next Shawn Michaels. He's not going to be the next Brock Lesnar. He's not going to be, the top of the food chain kind of thing. But in my mind, Dillinger was one of those guys that there's no reason why he wasn't at least a serious contender for the United States title. If not an actual United States champion. Or if he couldn't think of anything to do with him, put him in a tag team. There could have been plenty of people that he could have been tagging up with,
When I think of Ty Dillinger now, I just think, man, he's going to be such a good Royal Rumble pop whenever he comes back for the number 10 spot. Because that's all he did to begin with. The whole thing was, all right, we got that 10 guy on in the number 10 spot, and then they couldn't really get him going. He had a good 2-minute match with AJ Styles on SmackDown one time, but that's about it.
That feud with Baron Corbin could have gone somewhere if it wouldn't have been on SmackDown. Because again, Corbin, it's SmackDown, so.
How do you feel about Corbin? I feel like I liked the Lone Wolf character. Yes, the hair was a little weird because he was obviously balding, but Corbin seems to be that guy that Vince had to get his stench all over with the Constable stuff. And now it's like every time I see Baron Corbin, I groan.
I still like Corbin to a certain extent, but I do remember a certain time where he was feuding with Bold Dempsey, where I was like, Baron Corbin could end up being a future world champion, and then that didn't pan out, and it's not going to.
And people were really high on Baron Corbin. I think a lot of people forget when NXT was still kind of finding itself before it became the super indie that it is now. The whole Baron Corbin counting thing was super over.
Yeah, that was fun. I like that. I miss that.
Yeah. Do more of that, WWE.
Yeah. More counting. More perfect tens. But then we get, Tommy's out of the way. Dillinger is out of the way. Both of them, they want to leave WWE. They're not happy. They think that they can do better elsewhere, etc., etc. Arn Anderson, though. According to the reports, and of course you have to take this with a grain of salt because whenever it's rumors and speculation and dirt sheet kind of talk and everything, you never really know exactly what the full thing is. But according to what I've been seeing, and I'm assuming what you've been seeing too, the story here is that Arn Anderson was sticking up a lot for the talent, disagreeing with Vince McMahon, and Vince was like, I'm fucking done with this.
I don't know if I want to believe that because Arn's been there for so long. If he wasn't in Vince's inner circle by now, then what the fuck?
Then how was he there that whole time?
Yeah, because he was there for a while. Now, granted, I can see the pro wrestler in Arn coming out like, man, what the fuck are you doing with the Revival?
Yeah. Well, he's got to be good with them.
Yeah, they did the they didn't do a lot tonight, but they did the punch, duck the head, DDT. That's a classic Arn Anderson spot. And I think that it's a damn shame to lose Arn Anderson right before Flair's 70th birthday too.
I have this theory. Second time that this has been said tonight, but I've mentioned it before that I think that Vince McMahon is getting very nostalgic and very how do I choose my words here?
I'm at the end of my rope. I just want to relive my glory days.
To a certain extent, but I'm going in another direction too. This is the worst way that I can say it, but almost like dementia, where. And again, I'm not trying to say Vince McMahon has dementia kind of a thing, but the fact of the matter is Vince McMahon is older than he's been. That's how time works,
Yeah,
he's older now than he's ever been before, and tomorrow he'll be even older. But a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, the older that they get, the more surly they become, and the more that when they're feeling that disconnect from what their younger self is, they need to kind of prove that that's not the case. And you see a lot of older people do things where they're mean and nasty, because they feel like they're being taken advantage of, and they feel like they're being marginalized, and they want to prove that they're still, the top of the game and all the other kind of things like that. And I've been saying it for months that I feel like the way that things have been booked over the past 2 years in particular has been very much, I want to prove that I am right because I'm Vince McMahon and you're wrong. And a lot of things that are like, we're going to revisit that old idea that I had because I want to prove that that was a good idea a couple years ago. Like, we had Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. Why did we do that? Because it didn't go over the first time when we did it at WrestleMania 31, and fuck you, I was right. You know what I mean?
You think he sees Roman as his last
hurrah, kind of.
Yeah, like, this is it for him and for his style of creativity. Now, I don't want to write Vince McMahon off because he could very much live to 95, and as long as he's, like, in Mae Young shape, be making decisions till the very last day.
Mm-hmm.
But I totally feel like, especially with one of the hirings we're going to talk about in a little bit, that he is reaching for, let's just do this like we used to, like we did when it was fun.
Yeah, that kind of a thing. Like, I want to relive the way when things weren't getting me so down, and the ratings are causing some problems. So, fuck you. It's not that I created this kind of a mess. It's that the problem is I've been listening to so many other people, and I'm Vince McMahon, damn it, and I was right. Like, that kind of a thing. And I kind of feel like maybe Arn Anderson, this is pure speculation, because of course I'm not behind the scenes, but maybe Arn was a part of those people that was going, we can't book these guys in this kind of a way. We need to do this. We need to change this. And it could have been the wrong fucking day, and Vince McMahon could have been like, you know what, I'm sick of this shit. Fuck you, you're gone. I want to make an example out of you.
He didn't
He
didn't have his food that day.
Something like that. Somebody sneezed around him, or ate food with hands. Like, you hear these stories all the time, and that's the thing too. It's not just like out of nowhere. If you listen to different people and stuff, sometimes if you catch Vince on a bad day, it could be the end of the world for somebody. And
yeah, I want to be careful how I say this because I know, it's a very big thing in the world. But I often see people with tics and think, boy, if you were born today, you would have been labeled with a form of autism and on the autism spectrum. And when I hear something like Vince McMahon sneezed and like that was it for him, that sounds slightly like an autistic tic, doesn't it?
I wouldn't say necessarily along that kind of regard, but it's an eccentricity.
Like, it's like the whole thing with Andre. Like, Andre loved flatulence. Yeah, like, that's not.
Well, to be fair, farts are funny.
Farts are funny, but it's like, here's this giant 7-foot dude who's like, haha, I farted. Oh, it was a riot. It's great. It's like, nowadays that'd be a little weird. That's all I'm saying, is Vince McMahon is definitely a little weird. And not to plug that podcast again, but if you listen to 2001 A Wrestling Odyssey February, we talk all about his Playboy interview and how fucking weird this dude really is.
I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, he's a strange bird. And Tony, you gotta watch out because that lack of sleep thing, you share that in common with Vince.
Oh, I will fully admit I'm fucking weird too, and I'm sure ways that are going to manifest worse and worse over the years. And it's if I'm for some reason if I'm still doing Smack Talk when I'm in my 70s, it's going to be a goddamn shit show. So, future Tony, have fun with that.
Like somebody like buys fruit at the market. I bought grapes and I bought apples. God damn it! Why can't you just merge them into a grapple? Why can't it be a grapple? Merging.
It worked for Cran Apple, goddammit. Whoa, what are you talking about, old man? Are you some kind of authority? My last name is a fruit, you son of a bitch. I was born to talk about this topic. God damn it!
Oh God!
And why is there a North Dakota? Give me Shawn Michaels. But so the Arn thing, I feel like that maybe is what's going to come out eventually. Is that Arn was sort of adversarial to Vince McMahon's point of view, and Vince kind of has been feeling a little down and wanted to assert dominance a little bit. And the TJP thing, that is even stranger to me in a lot of ways, because recently he was asked on Twitter, when are you going to leave to go to AEW? And he said, if I had it my way, never. I'm playing for the team that I want to play with for hopefully the rest of my career and even after that. So that goes to show that TJP at least was playing ball when it came to the idea of saying, like, no, I don't want to leave because I really love WWE and this is where I want to be. And a couple days later, they fire him. Which is sort of like, oh, I love working here, boss. This is a great place. I love all the people that I'm working with, and I just have a lot of fun, and I wish that I could do a little more. Then they're like, well, I love your enthusiasm. Clean out your desk.
Not to say that things like that definitely don't happen in the world, because trust me when I tell you, pal, they do.
Yeah.
But TJ, let's just stick along the lines of Vince McMahon as a guy who doesn't like certain things. He dabbed in front of Vince, and Vince thought he sneezed. You're gone. You're gone.
Well, some people jumped to the idea that maybe it was the tattoos, and then he tried to clarify, saying that he got approval 6 months ago for the tattoos, and that Vince McMahon saw them on Tuesday and said, hey, those tattoos look cool. So on Tuesday, it was like, cool tattoos. And then the next thing you know, you're fired.
Well, okay, let's go back to this story from Shawn Michaels in 1988. Well, not 88, but like 87, when they first got hired. And they got into a little bar fight, and Vince McMahon said to them, nice boots. They're made for walking. Haha, just kidding. Come into my office. You're fired. So we...
I fucking love Vince McMahon.
So, there is that possibility as well.
It could be, and there's a lot of reports going around, which may or may not be true, again, of course, that this was a disciplinary kind of thing, that he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and may or may not be true when it comes to TJP in that regard, because I remember coming across some things like that in the past, but without any kind of, like, structural basis to that, it's hard to be like, yeah, he was doing this backstage, he was pulling a big Cass, or he was pissing off this guy, or it's all just scuttlebutt. So it sucks, because I really like TJP. Like, I really wanted him to be somebody that made even more of a success. I had him on my list of people that I was like, God, man, he's overlooked and he's underutilized, and it would be great if he were a mid-carder on, like, move the guy over to NXT if you need to, put him in the North American title situation. Like, that would be awesome. And the next thing you know, he's fired. So I'm like, all right, well, there goes that. But I hope that he goes to AEW, because I really want to see TJP succeed more.
So it's another one of those things, like we were talking about with the other guys like Ty Dillinger and Hideo Itami. TJP was the first Cruiserweight champion. Do you think Triple H looks at this and goes, well, goddammit, now this whole thing looks like a failure?
Even if he doesn't think that, I think other people do.
Very possible. I think TJP was a lot better than he was given credit for. I think the whole weird thing where it's like, he's TJP, not TJ Perkins. Was it true that that's because Vince McMahon just doesn't like the name of the restaurant Perkins? I'm not making that up. That was the rumor.
TJP got asked that on Twitter one time, and he said no, the whole thing was that he personally requested to go by TJP from then on.
Okay, well, I would really hope so, because...
That would be funny, though, if Vince was just kind of like, I don't fucking like Perkins. No to Perkins. Because, again, it's believable. Like, anything... And this is why I said I don't mean to say, like, dementia type thing. Like, the old man's got Alzheimer's or something like that. I mean, just, like, the insanity of this business and of Vince McMahon in general and all that. And he would probably fully agree. Like, you're running a company where you wake up on a Monday and it's like, can't use the name Apollo Crews anymore. People are going to get that confused. And then a couple weeks later, it's like, yeah, you can be Apollo Crews again. For what reason? Like, it's totally crazy. And there's almost a certain level of believability to every random ass thing that I could hear in WWE. And if there was a story that came out tomorrow that said that backstage, the plan for the Ric Flair thing wasn't Batista, it was that they were going to have the gobbledygooker come out and take a dump all over the place, and then IRS was going to, I don't know, slip and fall in it and sue, I'd be like, I can see that fucking happening. It's just sort of like, you never really know. So
could
if
you
the
really
Perkins
see that
thing,
happening?
oddly enough, I could. You'd be like, well, goddamn it, we have IRS. Why is he going to sue people? But it's weird situation because we don't know exactly. So TJP supposedly was flat out fired. Same thing with Arn Anderson. And at some point, more information is going to come out. And then, of course, we'll talk about that when it comes down to it. But we're not done talking about people coming into the company, coming out of the company, all that kind of stuff like that. Because we need to talk about something else to wrestle with, which is that Bruce Prichard has been rehired. This is what, his third term with WWE, I think?
Well, are you sure that's not all just rumor and innuendo?
Now chat me up.
Now chat me up. Brother Love is back for a third time. Chat me up.
Spin my... So, we're both fans of something to wrestle with and something else to wrestle with. More so the podcast than the network special. But when Prichard had the WWE Network special, of course, that was leaning a little bit more towards the idea that maybe there would be some kind of a working partnership in the future. And Conrad Thompson is, into the Flair family now. So that's another little bit of grease in the wheels. And even though they've had their dealings with the whole StarCast thing and all that, kind of interesting that he gets brought on board. And a lot of people are just totally against the idea. I'm not. I'm a little bit worried in some regards, but here's the viewpoint that I'm seeing a lot online. A lot of people are saying Vince McMahon wanted a yes man, and Bruce Prichard was hired to replace Arn Anderson, essentially, as Arn wasn't agreeing with me, but Bruce, that's what your job is. And I hope that that's not the truth. And I honestly don't necessarily think that that's going to be the case. Because I think, and I hope, that Prichard by now has been far enough removed from WWE, and he has Conrad in his ear. Conrad knows what people are thinking. You listen to the episodes, and he'll say things, like he'll reference things and be like, but you're going to go out and push Roman Reigns, right? Like, there's different things that he'll put out there that he's got his finger on the pulse with that kind of side of things. You got to assume at some point that's going to make that harder for Bruce to just be like, all right, Vince, let's just go with your thing. And for that matter, listening to something else to wrestle and something to wrestle with and all that, I get a little bit more onto this side of things saying maybe we've needed a Bruce Prichard all this time, because he does come up with these ideas that seem to be like, well, that's not the most logical thing to do,
Yeah, and I like the hiring. I do. I think, listen, there's nothing wrong with somebody who has made a lot of money in this industry getting another shot at it. I think a lot of guys would be better off trying again, like we were talking earlier about Eric Bischoff off the podcast. I would like to see him get another shot at it because he's got more experience in television. Bruce now has this, like, he's almost like the Bernie Sanders of the creative wrestling world. He's older, but he's got such a cool vibe to him that maybe he feels an obligation to bring this youthful vibe.
And I think that he's in that kind of scenario where he could obviously be just like the yes man, but to be honest, what if Vince is just kind of missing his buddy? And
Could
if it was
be.
just sort of like, hey, I don't like working with these people that I can't connect with, and you and I were close for so many years, and I want to just kind of reminisce with my fucking friend. Like, I think people are ignoring that. That could certainly be the case, because you build relationships with people to the point where they're practically family, and you miss them after a while. So why the fuck not, you know? And if this is a scenario where Bruce Prichard can be the type of guy that can step in and tell Vince things like, you know what, I think that it'd be better if we push this guy instead because, I don't know, just arbitrarily picking a random person. If he's like, you do realize that people tend to like Finn Balor, right? And if Vince would be like, well, fuck it, I don't see it, then he'd be like, yeah, but I know people like Finn Balor. Like, you know, Conrad, I can fucking call him up right now and he'll explain that people, you know, whatever. Like, that could be the case. Especially since Conrad's tight with Rick. And you know that Ric Flair has at least a little bit of pull with some certain kind of ties with Vince McMahon, you know? So what I get a little bit wary about, other than the idea that maybe there is that whole yes man kind of thing, but the Stephanie and Prichard stuff, is that going to cause any kind of issues between like some kind of things behind the stage like that?
Well,
Because Bruce seems to be very, very pro Triple H.
yeah, maybe it's a Triple H thing because let's not kid ourselves here. Triple H probably single-handedly, and this is where my head's maybe a little bit up Triple H's ass, but probably single-handedly brought back Bruno, brought on Sting, brought back Warrior, all this shit that was supposed to be damn near impossible. It was done. Triple H is a guy who understands the past, understands the history, and maybe he said, I like having Shawn around in the Performance Center. Maybe Vince wants his buddy.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But here's where I would ask you a little fun game. What's one character that you think Bruce Prichard could do something great for?
My gut instinct was Braun Strowman.
Why?
I got a feeling like he understands that he's a big motherfucker that's being overlooked. I could see Bruce Prichard putting up the argument saying, why haven't we given this guy a title yet, you know?
I really like the idea of Bruce Prichard being able to get in there and make something good happen for Bray Wyatt.
Yeah, that could work.
Bray Wyatt is a guy who, by God, should be doing much more than he has done lately. And I think Bruce Prichard can get that out of him because Bruce understands characters like that. Brother Love, in a lot of ways, is a knock on, cult leaders and, people who try to manipulate through the guise of love. And I think he could do a lot with Bray Wyatt. And plus, Bray Wyatt's, third generation? I'm sure they would get along just fine because of the respect Bray Wyatt has for the industry.
I guess the thing that I'm looking at this for is the very positive is it's somebody else that could potentially maybe speak to Vince in a way that other people can't necessarily speak to him. Like, they are friends. They have worked together for so many years. So there's that sort of camaraderie where he knows, like, well, if I say it this way, it'll come off better. And maybe a lot of these writers just don't necessarily know how to pitch things the same way and stuff. And maybe he can step in and kind of stop some of the bad ideas and all that. And the only negative being if we do get the yes man type thing, or if we get any kind of things that halts Triple H, that's what I'm worried about. But like anybody else, totally have to see how things pan out. And this could be the best thing for them. And I really kind of actually lean more towards this being a positive.
I do as well. As long as it doesn't fully interfere with their podcast. And listen, worst comes to worst, he gets fired in a year, we're gonna have some good stories of what was going on this year in professional wrestling.
That's another thing I'm really looking forward to is if they are able to continue the podcast and he's able to actually chime in a little bit on like some behind the scenes stuff, that would be such good insight to, even if it's not like super, super deep, but if you just kind of, throw out a little reference here and there to be like, oh, you might want to be checking out that Adam Cole, or, like something like that'd be really great. I want to know what's going on behind the scenes here, and awesome. We still have more stuff to talk about when it comes to StarCast, though, and tangentially podcasts and things that go along with that, which is that The Undertaker has trademarked Dead Man Talking underneath StarCast for podcast use and so on and so forth. Which kind of points in the direction that he's probably going to have some kind of a panel at StarCast 2, and that it'll be the Dead Man Talking thing, and then he might actually just kind of have a podcast going on afterward.
Now, is that something you would listen to?
I mean, in theory, 100%. If it's somebody like Conrad hosting it, and if they've got good chemistry, and if the topics are interesting and stuff like that, it'll just have to be a part of my regular rotation. But if it's somebody else, and if it's something where it's like, for instance, like Jericho's podcast, I can't get into it because he talks a lot about music, and I just don't care about music. And if he's like, I got Maroon 5 on, I'll be like, I don't fucking care anything about Maroon 5. I like some of the songs, but I don't know anything about any of the people. By now, I know that the main guy is Adam Levine, but whatever. It's kind of like that. Like if Undertaker is doing a podcast and he's talking the same kind of thing as something to wrestle with, where it's like, tell us about Bone Street Crew, tell us about your relationship with Brock Lesnar. Let's get into the fake Undertaker angle. Like, totally 100% in for that. But if it starts leading into the topics of, well, I really like bikes, check out that Harley Davidson, I'll be like, I can't fucking do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, unfortunately I do. And I have to agree with you. I want to hear The Undertaker talk about all of the wild shit that his character had to go through. Like, Undertaker can tell us some good stories about the Hogan era. He can probably tell us the best stories about the transitional era between, Hogan and, like, Brett. Like, even just that short window of, like, we don't want to fully go with Brett. What do we do? He could probably tell us a lot of good stories. So that's something I'm really looking forward to.
I want to hear his side of the story of the Kevin Nash story, where Nash was saying that Brett
Motherfucker,
didn't
not
want to
everything's
take.
about you.
Yeah, I want to hear that story from Undertaker's point of view, and if it's something like very reserved, and if he just goes, "Yeah, Brett wasn't really sure about taking that thing," and I said, well, that's gonna really help us out, or if he'll be like, "God damn it, Brett was pissing me the fuck off this one night," like, you know what I mean, like that's what I want to hear. So I'm very curious about Dead Man Talking. Great name too. Fucking love the name.
Did you see he was in a music video for a Spanish singer of all things, a guy called Bad Bunny, and he just appears like in a portrait mode shot video where he's just like, "Yo, Bad Bunny, it's the Dead Man. Do that concert for Puerto Rico," and that's it.
What?
It's just like, it's the weirdest fucking thing. Because it's just Undertaker in his house, dressed like American Badass, but like, "Yo, it's the Dead Man. Do that concert for Puerto Rico."
That's really strange. I might have to check that out. I don't know what the fuck that's all about, but
It's interesting to see that the Undertaker is like fully embracing 2019, and he's on like Twitter and Instagram, and he's just very not the Undertaker.
it'd be so great if he just starts posting a bunch of Snapchat filters and stuff. It's just like, look at me, now I'm a dog, like that kind of shit.
It's my yard, woof woof.
Like, I'm the undog taker. Well, I have one more hot tag to talk about here, and this one we could literally talk about this for ages. So I apologize if this goes on pretty long, but I don't want to talk about every little detail about it because, again, we could talk about it over and over again. There's so many things that we could dive into, but the story going around is Chris Hemsworth has signed on to play Hulk Hogan in a biopic. Now, I just recently saw Fighting with My Family. If you want to know my opinions about that, check out the review that's on Fanboys Anonymous. But a Hulk Hogan biopic, that is something I would, of course, be 100% interested in checking out because Hulk Hogan does have some pretty interesting stories to tell. First question I have, Chris Hemsworth.
Weird choice.
Weird choice, huh? He's big. And if you look at the way he looked in the first Thor movie where they like dyed his hair and everything, there's some potential that he could look like him. But I never would have thought of that, and that's very interesting.
Really weird. Very strange. Very odd timing too, because a lot of the world has seemingly just given up on Hulk Hogan after the racial outburst. And I don't know if now is the time to be like, yeah, remember how great Hulk Hogan was?
Oh, maybe that's why they're doing it. Maybe that was their attempt to be like, let's tell the story of everything leading up to this. Let's try to make it more sympathetic. And then the next thing you know, people are going to talk about things in a more positive light, kind of. Because the story supposedly is leading up to him becoming like Hulk Hogan. Not necessarily like, we're going to dive into the NWO or something.
All right,
I'd much rather prefer that kind of shit, but...
If you had to pick somebody to play Vince McMahon in a biopic, and not the one was considered, and is still being shuffled around, who do you pick?
I still do like that Bradley Cooper suggestion. But there's got to be some kind of a person that I just, like, am completely unaware of. Some, like, unknown that, I don't know, he's in, like, 2 episodes of The Handmaid's Tale or something like that. Like, that, something that I've never watched before. Has to be somebody out there that can do that kind of a job.
I'm kind of looking at Clooney right now. I don't know why, but Clooney is standing out to me.
Too old, I think, for that kind of part.
Maybe in, like, the now Vince, he could play. But the younger Vince, it would have to be somebody unknown that we're just not seeing yet. And
oddly enough, and this is somebody that I know a lot of people are going to go, what the fuck are you talking about? If you're going real young, Ansel Elgort.
Let's see.
Something about that name stood out to me. It just popped in my mind. Because Vince McMahon, at the younger age, when he was like the like ringside interviewer type.
You know what? I can see it.
Kind of like on like the goofier side,
So, but if we had a movie of him and we went from Ansel Elgort to like Bradley Cooper to George Clooney, I think it could work.
So this is where the whole like everything could go off the rails, but even though they're saying that this leads up to a point where it's not going to cover these kind of topics and stuff, just you got to assume if they carry over into certain portions of his career, certain people have to exist in there. Like, obviously, his wife is going to be one of the main people. And Vince McMahon has to be one of those people. Mean Gene Okerlund has to be somebody in this movie. And I'm like, man, like, I don't know who would play Mean Gene Okerlund. And
Christian Bale played a pretty convincing old man.
Yeah. Like, you can't just go like, well, Paul Giamatti's bald. He could be fucking Mean Gene, because he wouldn't be able to pull it off for that.
DeVito.
Yeah, you couldn't do DeVito for that. But, like, how do you cast some of these people? Like, if they were to cast an Iron Sheik, How can you get somebody that can ever pull off Iron Sheik the way that Iron Sheik needs to be pulled off?
No, Iron Sheik needs to play Iron Sheik. Fact.
You could get somebody to beat Bob Backlund. I don't think that that's hard. Get like
Michael Cera.
Yeah, you know, just like get somebody like that. Michael Cera actually probably be a really good choice. And you know, that's Bob Backlund was a pretty reserved type of character, pretty cookie cutter. But like Iron Sheik is a fucking madman. And who do you get for Macho Man if you were to do that?
Cheech. You get
for Macho Man.
You get Cheech to play Macho Man. No, for Randy Savage, it would have to be somebody who's. Now, I wasn't a fan of him as the Joker. I am a fan of him in other forms. What about Jared Leto? You think Jared Leto could fully embrace the role?
I don't see him visually looking like it, at the very least. Oh, wow. I'm looking up some fan casting things. Somebody has Michael Shannon for Vince McMahon. I don't hate that.
Let me see that.
He's the guy from Shape of Water, and he was Zod in Man of Steel.
Okay.
I don't hate that.
Yeah, I can actually kind of see that.
But I'm so curious for different people, like you know, like the Sergeant Slaughter and Ric Flair and Macho Man and Piper. Like, God, who do you cast as Piper, you know? Because you can get somebody to be Mr. T, and then it's, you know, you can just, okay, like, playing a caricature, but, like...
How about McConaughey for Macho Man?
Kind of like that. I kind of like that a lot, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you know?
This is going to be the type of thing that I'm more interested than anything else about this kind of a movie. Like, you could tell me, like, the story is about blah, 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 and I'd be like, yeah, who's playing fucking Gorilla Monsoon? Like, just, I want to know that kind of shit.
If James Gandolfini was still alive, he'd play Gorilla Monsoon.
Oh, man. I want to know the fan cast things that you guys have in the comments, too. Like, if you guys have any suggestions of who should be Paul or North or something, like, any kind of random thing, that would be great.
If you had to cast any red man in the movie, who would you cast him as?
Well, not King Kong Bundy. He's certainly too frail for that.
Maybe he could play Piper. A young Piper.
Maybe. Bulk up a little bit more.
Now I'm really curious as to who could play Flair. Okay, you know what? That's the role I want Christian Bale in.
For Flair? You know, at this point, Christian Bale for all of them. Maybe Andy Serkis does some motion capture for George the Animal Steel or something.
You know what? I'm sold on Christian Bale. For Ric Flair. Yeah, we would have way too much fun with this for the rest of the night.
Mm-hmm. This could be an entire month of fanboys discussion, but we're about an hour, so I think that's about as good enough time for us to kind of close up shop here. So as always, everybody, like we were just saying a minute ago, leave your comments below and tell us your thoughts about these kind of topics, especially if you got fan cast ideas, because man, the idea of these kind of things is just incredibly interesting to me.
All right. One more. Miss Elizabeth. Who plays her?
Oh, that could be so many different people. I don't know. For some reason, even though she doesn't look like her, Keira Knightley was the first to pop in my mind. But
I'd put Emma Stone in that role. I mean, I don't know if she could do it with the accent, but
I think that's actually probably the easiest one. There's lots of women that would look like they could kind of fill that part. But you start getting into people like, you know, Macho Man and stuff, and it's just kind of like, that's going to be crazy. That's going to be hard to figure out.
Oh, who plays Andre?
I don't think you can. CGI. That's a place, Andre.
Ah,
All that stuff's gonna be difficult. So, I obviously, if we get any more information about this, that they're gonna be hot tags in the future. This is gonna be one of those stories that I want to track like a bastard. So, drop those comments below. Tell us your thoughts on that. Make sure that you are hitting that subscribe button on the YouTube channel if you're over there. Drop it a comment and ring that little bell for the notifications, because the next thing that's going to be coming your way is the mailbag for February. Got a bunch of questions sent in by people already, and if you want to try to get in at the end of the wire, do that as soon as possible when you see this, because we were going to be recording that sometime on Wednesday, most likely. So you can't send a question in 20 minutes before we're going to do that and stuff. And if you want to follow us on the other kind of different stuff that we got going on, the Facebook and Twitter are both at SmarkOutMoment. Fanboys Anonymous, as I mentioned before, is fanboysanonymous.com, and you can check out the YouTube channel and the Facebook and Twitter and all the other kind of things that are happening with that. Again, Fighting with My Family, my review is up on that, so that's where you'll find that. I got outside interference material, I've got foreign objects, I got all the other kind of things that are happening, so just start clicking my name and start finding all the other kind of posts that are elsewhere. And oh yeah, that's what I'm forgetting. There's a TeePublic and a Redbubble shop that you can pick up merchandise. And if you also want to help us out and keep the lights on and sponsor some different ideas that you would like to hear us do in the line, like maybe you actually want us to sit down and do a whole discussion about casting different people from that old era, then you can't really do that in a mailbag, because it's just too time consuming, but it could be a special. So if you want to hit that tier on Patreon, then you can request that kind of a thing, and then we can try to get around to doing that kind of a thing. So keep all that in mind, everybody. Also follow what Rob's got out there. Rob?
yeah, keep an eye on wrestling news. Keep an eye on this week's Triple Threat, which will be a really fun discussion about the Women's Tag Team Championships, so keep an eye on that. Of course, as we mentioned a few times in this podcast, 2001 A Wrestling Odyssey, hosted by Calvin Wiggins, co-hosted by myself. February now up. We talk about Vince McMahon. We talk about all the crazy things that are happening in such a wild year in pro wrestling. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DudeFelice and TimekillerApparel.com. And that is it for me.
That's going to be it for both of us. Thank you for listening to this, everybody. All of your support is greatly appreciated. The likes, the favorites, the shares, the follows, the comments, and everything else that's happening that we were talking about in the plugs there. We will see you when we see you next in that mailbag. But for now, this has been another Smark Out moment, and we're being counted out.